Kalimera. Hi, and welcome to Battle Boned, the ultimate guide to ancient warfare with your host, Peter Bone. And welcome to Episode 2, Series 1 on Ancient Greek Warfare. Episode 2 is going to be about the Battle of Hysiae, or in Latin, Hysiae. It's about 669 BCE. It is the first of this kind. And it's important because it's part of this mythos behind the phalanx, how it was created. And so we have Phaedon, the tyrant of Argos, and the aggressor, which is the city-state of Sparta. And Sparta has just come off big wins. It's conquered all of South Peloponnese. And they kind of turn their eye to the city-state of Argos. And Argos has, been kind of expanding and annexing farmland too. And so we really have the makings of a good battle here. But it doesn't go in Sparta's favor. This is kind of an epic loss to Sparta. And I think this is, if it's true, I mean, the sources that we have on this are kind of spotty. Pausanias, the Greek geographer, was considered kind of a reputable source, but not so much in recent scholar trends in academia. We have some other smatterings of writings here and there, so we got to kind of piecemeal this together. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that if we kind of go with, hey, this probably could have happened, it is a good kind of insight into the adoption of the phalanx and the adoption of the aspis, which is the 3.5-foot oak and bronze sheeted shield that kind of gives the rise to this proto-phalanx that we kind of see depictions on the Kiki base that was found in Etruria. So here we have Phaedon, the tyrant of Argos. He kind of says, okay, well, we've been skirmishing and fighting, and now, I have enough manpower to kind of rely on a greater pool of people. And so I'm going to use that to my advantage. And, we have shield walls, but they're not really as effective as I want them to be. So I'm going to devise a system to kind of pull the ranks a little bit tighter, maybe a little bit more unit cohesion, and really utilize different lines and, fight in more of a more organized shield wall, right? But we still have to remember that this is still kind of a proto-phalanx. The evidence of a tight-packed unit of shield wall, phalanx moving as one unit cohesion, just one block of just mass of death and destruction. Doesn't really come until the Peloponnesian Wars around 430 to 400 BC. And a lot of people are like, well, the aspis would have been useless outside of, mass formations. Well, this is kind of where I prescribe to the camp of, well, maybe, there's different, aspis is all around, but you could have like a crescent moon shape, you could have divots in it. They could have been made of lighter materials, not even been coated with, metal that made them really heavy, because bronze is expensive then, and it's still kind of expensive now. And tin is really rare earth metal. And so then you have this idea of like, well, how do I outfit this many guys with bronze? And it probably cost a lot of money to outfit, even then, even in archaic Greece, even more so, because for most of history, the average of the common man was a farmer. They didn't really have a lot, maybe subsistence farming. And so, the guys that are fighting have a little bit more at stake because they're more so members of the citizens of the polis. They have a little bit more, maybe a trade, empire going on, some kind of stall. They make money, right? So you have the ideas of the duel. You have the ideas of raiding settlements and other polis. You have ambushes, and the Greek Navy is coming kind of into its own too. Maybe you have guys fighting on ships. So the role of the aspis probably was an evolution. It was probably an evolution from Greece, from previous ages, the Mycenaean and the Bronze Age, and kind of filtering down. And it wasn't, what we think about like a total collapse, like the society totally collapsed and we forgot how to live. probably didn't happen that way. And so we still have some of these evolutionary things. It just takes a while for the population to kind of come back from a lot of the war and famine and drought and all kinds of the subscribed uh, theory now is probably a lot of climate change happened very rapidly, within several decades that caused a lot of this crap. It was just like, oh, we can't feed ourselves. And so then you descend into chaos and you get stuff from that. But I don't think that it was just Argos being like, hey, we created this wonderful idea, out of thin air. I think it was just a culmination of stuff. So now you have Sparta marching up, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and conquer you, Argos. I know you're set up here in the city. Argos is like, that's fine, come on in. Let's test out how wonderful these shields are now that we've made some money. And I bet some cheeky ass Greek guy wrote Dexe on his spear, which means catch in Greek. It's like, here, catch this, stabbing away. Holy shit, man. So the battle begins. Sparta is arrayed in its kind of its loose formations. They got shields, they got their panoply, and the gates are open. Well, that's curious. So Sparta being Sparta, they charge right on in, like, oh, we're going to attack you. And, you don't have really prescribed codes of war that we know about here. And so now you have Sparta entering through the gates of this police, this smaller police, this city. And you have guys probably running and stopping and going, what the hell? And you see these guys with these big shields arrayed in a formation, tight packed formation within these city streets. And now you're going to have to attack them. So Sparta probably starts attacking. They run in and they try to, maybe the shield wall of some kind, and they just don't have the kind of technology to be able to answer to the large bronze covered aspis. And so now you have, instead of just the front rank, you have a couple of ranks back with their spears, probably longer than the Spartans, arrayed. And so now you don't just have the front line, you have wall of death and destruction. And it would have been absolutely terrifying either way. But to go into a battle like that, you would have to have balls or nerves of steel to begin with. And then now to go up against something that you really haven't seen. Sparta didn't know what to do. They were kind of lost. And so they got absolutely slaughtered in the streets of Hysiae. And, row after row, kind of slaughtering down each man, stabbing him in the neck, stabbing him in the groin, stabbing him in the armpit, anywhere that they can find a artery or a vein to make him bleed to death. And Sparta eventually tucks tails and runs. They run back to Sparta, and they don't really assault Argos again until the 400s BCE. Argos is like, haha, we've won the day. Fuck you, Sparta. But Sparta comes back with vengeance. Sparta becomes the ultimate hegemony. But we'll get to all that later on. I just really wanted to also quickly go over kind of the center of gravity and the mental aspects of facing this kind of shield wall. There is a physicality to it, obviously, but there's also this emotional aspect to it where courage and nerves of steel are really quite desired. And so Greeks talk about being noble. Obviously, it means something a little different to Socrates and the Athenians, but for the most part, it means someone who's really, really brave. And to be completely frank, having balls of steel like that in the face of combat where you're having spears thrust at you, swords flying, missile troops throwing crap at you, and it's like, holy shit, putting yourself in kind of that mind frame, that imagination of what actually kind of happened in these battles is crazy. And so I think more so than not, especially in the earlier eras of ancient wars, it was the steel or the metal of troops being able to stand and kind of go through these battles and just stand your ground. Doesn't matter if the man to the left or right of you fall, you keep fighting. And that is a very mentally taxing thing, I think. Mostly taxing. And I can't imagine the the serious PTSD that comes from this stuff. It's like it's super dark. And so I think there is a lot of room in Greece, for comedy and stuff due to this warfare. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to think about that kind of stuff. But having that metal, these guys must have just been naturally pumped full of testosterone and adrenaline at the time. I really like this excerpt from Tyrtaeus, who is the Spartan poet, the war songs of Tyrtaeus. And he says of the phalanx, "Now of those who dare, abiding one beside another, to advance to the close fray, and the foremost champions, fewer die, and they save the people in the rear, but in the men that fear, all excellence is lost. No one could ever in words go through those several ills which befall a man, if he has been actuated by cowardice, for 'tis grievous to wound in the rear the back of a flying man in the hostile war. Shameful too is a corpse lying low in the dust, wounded behind the back by the point of a spear." And now comes the part where it's story time, where I put you into the eyes and ears of a soldier fighting in the lines of the ranks of the shield wall proto-phalanx, and what the experience must be like. The hot summer sun was stifling, his eyes watering from the smell of all the other men packed tightly together in the small but cramped streets. Also hot from all the bronze that he had on, heavily weighed down. His shield, his helmet, his breastplate, his greaves, his sword, his spear, all heavy. But he had gotten used to it over time. He was now a veteran, standing in the front rank, a high honor in the city of Argos. But nerves are always a thing that men have to contend with, and he did his best to steel them, to calm his fear, to keep his adrenaline in check. But a chill went up his spine as he heard the approaching men from the city-state of Sparta. They have never tasted defeat, but he was going to give it to them today. The gates were flung wide open, and Spartans, confused, ran through them. Pouring in one after another, they stopped as they saw his formation. Tight shields, spears to the ready. This was the proto-phalanx. And Phaedon had laid a trap. Another chill went up his spine, and goosebumps rippled all over his body. His muscles tightened, and he struggled to keep control of his nerves. After a brief and intense few seconds, the battle began in earnest. The Spartans running and screaming with their war cries all the way to his position. But his men and himself lowered their shields, raised their spears. They were ready. He had cheekily written Dexai on his spear. Catch this. He dared the Spartan to catch his spear. Laughing all the way as the Spartans were running to his position, knowing that he was much better protected, much more trained, drilled, and veteraned. The first Spartan caught up, then the second and the third, and instead of crashing into shields with short spears, swords, the ranks began to stab over and over. The first Spartan caught on his spear, ran his eye all the way through. and he yanked the spear out, and his eye popped out with it. Screaming in agony, the man dropped down to his knees, and he again stabbed in the neck to make death swifter. Blood ran out, began to spurt all over him and the shield. He could taste the saltiness and hear the gurgling. That's what always got him. No matter how steeled he was, it was always the gurgling of men dying that made his nightmares the worst. But still more Spartans kept running, and still he and his battle brothers thrust over and over again with their spears, catching the Spartans in their armor, only for the Spartans to be caught with another spear and laid low by this new and ambitious shield wall. Almost to the point of exhaustion, the men kept going, kept fighting, kept stabbing. Spears were beginning to render and shudder and break, and swords were drawn. But yet the spears kept going, and the shields kept holding. Stabbing became furious. But the Spartans eventually had enough of death, and they ran. They ran out of the city and all the way back to Sparta. And Argos was victorious. And there was cheering and clapping, and he was so tired from the tensity, from the brutality, from the physicality of this battle, that he couldn't wait to go home and see his wife, drink his wine, and try to forget about the battle and make ready for the new one that was surely to come under the tyrant of Argos. And that's the end of story time. I appreciate you guys bearing with me through that. I wanted to give you a perspective of, a soldier that was fighting for the police of Argos. Got his panoply, his new shield, the Argri, which is the special straps. And again, I just wanted to say thank you so much for listening all the way through my podcast. This is episode 2. We'll keep continuing with Archaic Greece, and I have a couple more battles lined up that you guys will like. So I just wanted to again extend my thanks to anybody who listens to this and say, if you guys have any comments or criticisms or ideas, there's contact information on the website to these podcasts, on Podbean and Libsyn. And I look forward to hearing from you guys and putting out some more content. So thank you again for listening, and have a good one.